What is the largest killer of men under 50? Is it cancer? Is it heart disease? Recreational drugs? Nope. It's none of those. It's suicide. It's always been around, but instead of a positive change, it's only getting worse. This is a growing epidemic, evidenced by the fact that suicide rates in England and Wales are now at their highest since 1999. But how do we even begin to stop it? Over 6,000 people died last year in England and Wales by suicide. On average, each person has 6 first-degree relatives, meaning over 36,000 people were directly bereaved by suicide. What I want to focus on today is a group of people who are often overlooked. Those 36,000 who are left behind once the metaphorical atomic bomb has been dropped and destroyed everything in its path. We must help this vulnerable group of people who are statistically more likely to take their own life to have any chance of decreasing alarmingly high suicide rates. Suicide remains a deeply entrenched stigma, a taboo that silences those who suffer and those who grieve. We need to give those people a voice. People like me. And I'm sure many of you too. But how do we break the continuity of this silence, this shame, this stigma? By changing the conversation. By building a culture where grief is not a burden, but a shared human experience. And where shame is replaced with compassion, with empathy and understanding. Loss by suicide is truly unique and can create devastating ripple effects. It is a grief like no other. Not only are you mourning the loss of a loved one, but you're drowning in a flood of highly complex emotions. Not to mention that list of questions that cannot be answered. Ever. Why did they do it? Did I miss the signs? Was it my fault? Today, I'm going to talk to you about loss. I'm going to talk to you about grief. But most importantly, I'm going to talk to you about hope. Because most people who've lost someone to suicide are left with no hope whatsoever. Tell me, why is it that talking about loss by suicide can make people feel very, very uncomfortable? Why can this topic fill a room with awkwardness in a matter of seconds? Why is this topic associated with shame, with stigma, with embarrassment? Why do people still say committed suicide as if it's a crime when it hasn't been since 1961? You are 65% more likely to attempt to take your own life if you've lost someone to suicide. If you've lost a direct relative, you're between 2 to 5 times more likely to succeed in taking your own life. Yet, there are only a handful of suicide bereavement services available, even today. When you've lost someone to suicide, it makes it so much more real. You know it's possible, and you know it's a very, very real way out. Trust me, I know, and I'm going to tell you how. My dad was the life and soul of the party, a real man's man, seemingly indestructible. He loved a drink, and he hated all forms of emotion. From a very, very early age, his view of how a man should be was instilled in me. And men never cried, no matter how old you were. He was up every day at 4 a.m. and he's shouting from the rooftops about how hard he worked and how everyone should follow suit. He achieved great things and was respected by so many. He made and lost fortunes, but for the most part lived a life of extreme luxury. A yacht, a jet, a penthouse in St. Moritz, a mansion in Oxfordshire. But at what cost? Nearly 15 years ago, I lost my dad, Paul, to suicide. And I can hand on heart tell you it flipped my world upside down. The day he died, he was declared bankrupt. And in his mind, this was the ultimate failure. He thought that he was defined by his success and the material items he owned. He thought this was why he was loved. But he was so wrong. If I could deliver one message to my dad, it would be that none of that mattered. And all I want is my dad back. In 2010, the year I lost Dad, mental health was not on the social agenda, and support for those bereaved was limited at best. I went off the rails, masking my pain and confusion with drink. I didn't know where to turn, and I was too embarrassed to ask for help. I didn't want to be labeled as the guy whose dad lost all his money and killed himself. I was lost, and I had no hope. So what did I do? I stayed silent for 10 long years. Why? Because it was easy. Or so I thought. I was merely leaving it there to fester, blissfully unaware that it would come back with a vengeance when I least expected it. I needed to show the world that I was okay, that I could cope, that I was a real man, just like Dad had shown me. At Dad's funeral, I read my eulogy to hundreds of people without shedding a tear. I was so proud of that and wore it as a badge of honor because that's what Dad had taught me. But looking back, it's nothing to be proud of at all. How brave and powerful would it have been had I stood there in front of all of those people and shown them my true vulnerability, shown them what was actually going on and how my world had just been ripped apart. My dad's trauma had been well and truly passed down, and I was on the path towards self-destruction. And the worst part about it was, I thought I could get through it all alone. I was so wrong. But why am I telling you all of this? Because we can break the cycle of trauma. As said by the late Robin Williams, suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. A problem caused by isolation. A problem caused by a lack of support. And a problem, in some cases, caused by those who we loved and lost, passed down through generations. It's a tough fact to admit, but my father's decision to take his own life has and will continue to affect both me and my family forever. And I'm still angry with him because of that. But we do have the power to mitigate this impact by being open and honest and getting the support we so desperately need. We, as a society, we need to do more than just spread awareness. We need our leaders and decision makers to set an example and take action, because trauma, especially the trauma compounded by the shame and stigma of loss by suicide, if left unaddressed, is passed through generations. breaks my heart every day knowing my kids will never get to meet my dad. My eldest is 8. And ever since he was born, I have been dreading the day that I would have to tell him how his grandfather died. And that day came just a few weeks ago. He'd had a bad day at school, and not for the first time was expressing himself by saying things like, "I don't want to exist anymore." Unsurprisingly, this really got to me. So I plucked up the courage to say, "Did you know that my daddy didn't want to exist anymore? And he died on purpose. Is that what you want too? Because I'll really miss you, and it made me really sad." He understood instantly, and I noticed a shift in his mood. He didn't mean it. He just didn't know how to express himself in words. This conversation felt like a pivotal moment in his life. A conversation where he got a tiny glimpse of the trauma that I have faced. Trauma that I'm doing my best not to pass down. But why was I dreading this conversation with my son so much? Because I didn't want him to feel the shame that I'd felt for so many years. But what if that shame didn't exist? What needs to change to make that happen? We must support the bereaved, the group that is statistically most likely to take their own life, with specialist support. Why? Because suicide grief is different. It's complex. Navigating this type of grief can be lonely and isolating. Government health officials and charities can be instrumental in focusing on this key group. And all of you here today, and everyone listening to this talk, we all have a potential role to play in destroying that shame and decreasing suicide rates. Normalizing talking about suicide is the first step. If you know someone who's been bereaved, don't shy away from that conversation hoping someone else will do it. Talk to them about it. Ask them how they're feeling. But most importantly, listen without judgment. This is not just about changing a statistic. This is about rewriting the narrative of grief and transforming shame, silence, and stigma into a catalyst for change. Ensuring that the legacy of loss isn't one of despair, but of resilience and hope. Let's create change for the better. And let's make sure that those suffering in silence no longer have to feel the burden associated with that heavy word, suicide.